This is the Fifth Estate winning headlines, your media police post. Brought to you by the Fort Hall School of Government, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you might have missed this morning. But we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 26th of June 2020, and I am 2J.
I'm Tuam.
And I am GK, and in case you missed the headlines, here they are. In the Daily Nation, historic win over graft. In the Standard, Uhuru kicks out more Ruto allies. And in the Star, BBI may recommend powerful PM post.
Yes.
So diverse headlines there.
Very.
Yes.
Let us begin with an ongoing story from yesterday, the Daily Nation.
Absolutely. So last evening actually, Chief Magistrate Elizabeth Juma, she did a historic ruling, and that's why the Nation is saying historic win over graft. And she sentenced. It was a ruling. John Waluke, MP, Sirisa MP John Waluke, and his co-accused Grace Wakungu to I think it's to serve about 39 years in jail combined,
and a fine
of about 2.1 billion shillings. Man, that was hefty.
That is a deterrent if I've ever seen one. If you are thinking of engaging in corruption, this is why not to.
but FGK, you're telling me there is a way that they can postpone their fate.
I think they can appeal. I think they have 14 days in which to appeal this sentence. But also it could live on in the courts for many more years. People forget that this court case started as far back as 2004. We are now in 2020, the year of our Lord. So, there's a way that a clever lawyer would play this out in the system. And they also have fines to pay in lieu of doing jail time.
But then is it actually a deterrent then? If we're talking about a case that has existed for a long time, that's over 10 years. I mean, is that not telling the next guy, don't worry?
But if you have power and connections on your side, I mean, if you look at Grace Wakungu and Waluke, they both have heavy hitters politically backing them, and maybe that's what has some people have called the sentencing actually quite lenient, because they're saying there should be a base minimum of jail time, but these guys are being given the option. If you can pay for each count, you can reduce your years.
Time.
Absolutely.
And you have a count going for as little as 100,000.
Whoa.
But then you also have a count that is quite high as well.
Yeah, true. I like the headline though.
I like it. It is a historic win, and it's good to see EACC at the end of the spectrum. Usually we see them at the beginning, and then they disappear. We don't hear from them again. Well, we have a 3-part criteria that we're going to use to break down the headlines. We're going to ask ourselves, is it topical or speculative? Is it repetitive or groundbreaking? And is it thoughtful or just plain lazy? I quite like it.
I like it too.
It is groundbreaking, it is thoughtful, and it's pretty topical. So in the Standard, Uhuru kicks out more Ruto allies. What's new? So here we're being told that the leadership from various National Assembly committees are about to be replaced. 6 legislators will join the 16 others who have already since lost their plum jobs in the House in this ongoing offensive, as the Daily Nation calls it. So you have casualties such as Julius Melly in education, Ali Wario in labor and social welfare, William Kisang in communication, information and innovation, Joseph Limo for finance, and Josh Nyamoko. And basically the standing order that's being followed here is Standing Order 172 of the National Assembly and Standing Order 176, where you are being informed that you are being removed and they're following procedure. But it's done. And these seats will be taken on by ODM, WAIPA and the new coalition members.
Do you think DP Ruto regrets his aggression on the big man? Because
he ought to.
By the time the man has, by the time Uhuru has moved in and cleaned up house, literally there is absolutely no ally of Ruto remaining in the house. Then it means they must have underestimated Uhuru in the past 7 years.
And it's what happens when you make a covenant with no swords, right? What will Ruto do if he is being treated this way? Absolutely nothing.
But I think it still goes back to this question we keep asking. What card could he possibly have up his sleeve? I don't think that you can sit back and watch, every part of your life being chipped at one by one and not have anything left to play with.
The only thing William Ruto has right now is two. There are only actually two things. First, if he comes into an agreement with an unholy alliance with Maraga, they dissolve parliament. But second is mass insurrection. And I think that's what they're trying to do. When you see fellows like Mudama and this Ali fellow
shifting,
trying to say, talking about land and that kind of thing, it tells they're trying to whip up emotions
from the ground.
I doubt it will work though.
Well, this reminds me of Machiavelli, who said, act so your enemies do not know how you want to organize your army for battle. I think Uhuru we hadn't seen him coming. DP for sure had not seen him coming quite in this way. But let's see how it goes. Should Uhuru Kenyatta be fostering more loyalty on the ground, given that he's about to pass BBI? Who knows? Shall we...
On to BBI in the Star.
Yes.
BBI may recommend powerful PM post. I don't think this is something we did not know before. However, the Star is trying to give us, a take on what they think may be happening. So there is the new BBI report that is meant to come out in the next few days, I believe. And the Star is saying that it's taking a radical departure from the initial report of November 27th, 2019. So initially, they're saying that the president would then be the one to admit who would become the prime minister. But they're saying that in this new BBI report, the prime minister would be appointed by the ministers of parliament instead. So what they're actually saying is that the only shift is the question of who would have the appointing power. Initially, it would be the president, but now they're saying that it may be the House. I think that what the president is doing right now is incredibly smart. He is hitting two birds with one stone. I think on the first front, he's clearing the way for BBI, right? I think if he is in control of parliament, he's in control of Senate, he's in control of almost everything, BBI will have no opposition, or rather it shouldn't have any hard issues to get to success. And on the second front, he's ensuring that the deputy president is completely isolated. As we've said from the Standard, he has no friends anywhere. So
absolutely. And you know what, this is so well timed. You see, if the report is coming out next week, he has cleared the way in parliament and in Senate. Now look, there are two ways to introduce a referendum, if at all that's his plan. It's either by popular initiative or parliamentary initiative. Very likely this will go to popular initiative. What threshold does he need in the ground? 24 counties, for example. You just need 25%
of registered voters
of actually county assemblies to vote on that thing. Let it come to parliament. It will sail through parliament because now you have a majority leader that's on your side. You have allies in Senate that are on your side. This thing probably will have a new constitution by December.
But when something looks so easy, is it going to be this easy? I think the thing for Kenyans to remember is that a PM position in Kenya traditionally has been seen as RAILA's position. And I think Kenyans should move away from that. I think it can go to other people, and that's the beauty of what BBI could be proposing, that a parliamentary system sees a young lady or a young man from a smaller ethnic group rising to prime minister position. You're laughing.
This thing has been decided, my friends.
Well, what the evil laugh? My gosh.
It's been decided. Let me ask you. Do you
I'm
think
just trying to get buy-in from the people.
Do you think these guys would go through such trouble to go and create a position for some guy from, I don't know, whatever tribe?
You're so elitist.
Absolutely, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Wow.
Okay, I'm lost for words.
Guys, who do we give our winning headline?
I think the Star just misses the point. I don't think the headline itself is not telling us anything new.
Although I mean, you guys are in tune to the political elite and their conversations. Absolutely. The average Kenyan may not have known this.
However, how many times have we seen this headline? BBI will recommend powerful PM posts. I think we could count probably 5 of them by the Star alone.
Okay, fine. You can toss it. Do we give it to the Daily Nation or the Standard? I prefer the Daily Nation. The historic win over graft.
Definitely.
Fantastic. So I'll toss these two. That gives us our winning headline. On to the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country, where we also have a 3-part criteria. We ask ourselves, is it humorous or dry? Is it satirical or pessimistic? And is it effective or just plain lazy? Shall we begin with the Daily Nation?
Yes.
Where we have a caricature of Uhuru Kenyatta and DP Ruto, and they both have tape measures. And they're measuring different newspaper headlines. And the quotation there is the art of political social distancing. But in the newspapers, you can see the Kariobangi demolitions, SGR in Naivasha, Depot controversy, Afya House COVID budget, health workers strike notice. So they're trying to distance themselves from the issues that have been part of the Jubilee administration. But also, are they trying to blame it on one or the other?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Absolutely. I mean, when you see, and I'm going to repeat it again, this guy, this Dichopevu fellow and Mudama, by the time they're coming out to say that SGR is benefiting a couple of people, they're not being honest. They are trying to whip up emotions, and yet they themselves are not very clean. It's people who live in glass houses that laugh to those stones. You know?
Fantastic. Okay, let's park it for the commentary. What is in the Standard?
The Standard, you have a drawing of a Kenyan, of Kenya being brought down by Corona, and this Kenya is trying to also to survive by
hanging off a cliff.
Hanging off a cliff, and the cliff is called economic crisis. Look, I was actually reading something yesterday that South Africa's economy is likely to drop by 7%. GDP is likely to drop by 7% just because of Corona. Point is, we're not the only ones going through this. I think the world economic growth, GDP, is going to tumble.
Also, it's the weekend. Can we toss the Standard? We want something uplifting for Kenyans.
Very fast.
Okay, in the Star, what do we have?
You have Raila, a caricature of Raila Odinga, and there you have, this thing is called a stethoscope.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Doctor stethoscope. And
a Facebook stethoscope.
Yes, and and the daktari there is Facebook actually.
And then there's Twitter.
There's Twitter over there, and the caption there is "Online doctors at it again."
Yeah, and you have the WhatsApp sign as well.
Yes, and I think the caption here is I don't know what's up with Kenyans, but people have been speaking about the health of.
There was a lot of controversy because he launches the Inga Dam, or we think he's launching some dam in DRC, only to hear that he was actually
jet off to
in the UAE, right?
Yeah.
Who do we give our winning cartoon? Is it the Star or is it the Daily Nation?
I think the Star cartoon is so pessimistic. Look at his bloodshot eyes. He looks like a zombie.
Can we give the Daily Nation?
Yeah.
With the art of political...
No winning cartoon.
No winning cartoon?
They're telling us the obvious.
Okay, no winning cartoon this weekend.
That's not a problem for me.
And what is our final thought?
And now our final thought, it is inspired by a book entitled Ponzi Schemes, The True Story of a Financial Legend by Michelle Zukov.
Nice. Before you do, may I give a summary?
Should I have said Mitchell?
It's all right. I'll give the correct title once GK has given us the summary.
Okay, so this week we looked at the biggest cons and scams of all time. We interrogated why they happened, how they happened, and why they continue to happen, because some are iterations of each other, right? Yeah. On Monday we looked at The Smartest Guys in the Room, The Amazing Rise and Scandalous Fall of Enron by Bethany McLean and Peter Elkind, a story of greed, arrogance, and deceit, and all that's wrong with American business today, and how clever accounting can make the very few very rich. Enron is a masterclass business study case. It is the 6th largest bankruptcy in the US that was ever filed in corporate history. But people still wonder how a company that had 21,000 employees in over 30 countries and stated revenues of more than $100 billion ran out of cash the very next day after declaring its bankruptcy. Like it couldn't even run for one single day. Yeah. On Tuesday, we looked at the Panama Papers in a book called Laundromat by Jake Bernstein. And it was showing us how the rich and powerful play by their own rules and how they make their money disappear into offshore companies and tax havens. We looked at the famous law firm in Panama called Mossack Fonseca that was at the center of the leak, and how they created a mass market service for offshore accounts. Not just reserved for the elites. We found Kenya had over 190 people using their services. On Wednesday, we looked at the Nigerian scammers, the famous 419 scam, where we looked at the digital hustler and his or her letters to unknowing Europeans and Americans and foreigners, where the Nigerian prince would, occasionally ask for an advance fee in exchange of unlocking a large sum of money. And here we saw how it's not people becoming more foolish by falling for these scams, but the methods that they're using are becoming more cleverer. In 2018 alone, $700,000 was sent by Americans. So the con continues in very different variations. On Thursday, we looked at the Luanda leaks made famous by Isabel dos Santos, once labeled Africa's first female billionaire. But she's now living in exile and under investigation for plundering Angola's resources and wealth, teaching us that all that glitters is not gold. And today today we're looking at the man who made Ponzi schemes famous or infamous.
So this final thought is inspired by a book entitled Ponzi's Scheme, not Ponzi schemes. It's a scheme of Ponzi himself. The True Story of a Financial Legend by Mitchell Zukoff. You were close to him. So this book paints a very fascinating portrait of America's most famous swindler, as well as the people he duped and the people who brought him down. So Zukoff actually paints Ponzi as a complex character. So although he spent very lavishly on himself and his wife, he never at one time took the option of fleeing away with the money he had accumulated.
Right.
He always seemed to really believe that he could make his plans work if only somehow he got lucky with his investments. So this was at a time when anything seemed possible. Instant wealth, glittering fame, fabulous luxury, and for a number of magical months. I think it's very important to bear this in mind. This only happened for a couple of months. In the weeks of spring and summer in 1920, Charles Ponzi made all of this seem to be true. He promised to double his investors' money in 3 months, and this dapper and very charming man raised the Rob Peter to pay Paul scam to an art form. And at the peak of his success, he was raking in more than $2 million every single week from his office in downtown Boston.
Not bad.
So who exactly was this Charles Ponzi man? And why did so many people give him their money? And for the author, the answer is a combination of factors. And he says it's Ponzi's irresistible charm, the salesmanship that he had, human greed, mob mentality, the immigrant experience, in fact, and a thirst to get rich very quickly in the roaring 20s. So this young man, Ponzi, was born in 1882 in Lugo, Italy. And his family had these claims to royalty, which I think suited this man very well. And he had ambitious dreams, but absolutely no desire to work hard. He actually only grew, they say in the book, to be 5 feet 2 inches tall. That's very short. So he attended the University of Rome.
What does his height have to do with anything?
I don't know. Small people seem to have big ambitions, no?
Okay.
So he went to the University of Rome, but he dropped out because he spent all his time partying rather than studying. And so he decided to set sail to the United States. And they say in the book that his uncle promised him that the growing country streets were paved with gold. So at this time, if we just set the scene, it was possible for businesses to send international and stamped envelopes to clients or potential suppliers so that the receiver, the person receiving the envelope, wouldn't have to pay for the fees. And so a business in Italy, for example, could send a stamped envelope to a business in the US and it would be accepted in the United States. Now, this is where the twist comes in. Due to currency fluctuations in the 1920s, this is post-World War I, it was theoretically possible to buy these coupons, these stamps, in one country and cash them out in the post office of another country and make a profit on the exchange rate. And so Ponzi saw an opportunity in this kind of broken system, and he decided to exploit it. And so he earned the trust of investors and working class Bostonians with their entire life savings. And so he made this scheme a scam rather than a speculative venture, and he guaranteed to pay his customers 50% return in just 45 days. And when he couldn't make these payments, he simply repaid old investors through the money of the new investors who had come in. And that's where we get this idea of the Ponzi scheme or the pyramid scam. And so unfortunately, this house of cards came tumbling down in part through the relentless investigative reporting of the Boston Post. Journalists eventually exposed Ponzi for his scam. Banks refused to extend him credit. He went bankrupt. He served time in prison. He was ultimately deported back to Italy. Then he died in a Brazil charity hospital in 1949. And many of his investors got some of their money back, but many others just lost everything. And this is where we get this name, Ponzi scheme.
His name lives on.
Yes.
At least he made history. So what's interesting when you've mentioned the media is the crucial role that the media had at this time. So the context is the roaring 20s. People are ambitious, they're hungry, they want to succeed. And so you have a newspaper that sort of let the con continue. And what would happen is that Ponzi and his associates would advertise in the newspapers, and they would say stuff like, you know, return in 45 days, and they would have better returns than the traditional banks. So a lot of people got traction. Now, at that time, the newspapers tended to be more reactive than proactive. So the investigations weren't as in full swing. But also they feared that Ponzi, who had made so much money at that time, would actually come and sue them for libel, for calling him a fraud if they didn't have enough evidence, so they shied away from it. Now, interestingly, In chapter 9 of this book, it's labeled Always Reaching for the Moon. And here the author takes us through Ponzi's moral struggle. So I'll come back to the newspapers, but in the meantime, Ponzi felt guilty. He felt like he wanted the scheme to work. And he said, okay, let me just keep going. Eventually I'll figure out how to match the coupons and give my investors their return beyond the principal, like I had promised. But he just couldn't figure it out. Not only that, he feared that if he came clean, a lot of policemen had actually invested their life savings into the Ponzi, into his investment scheme, and his in-laws as well. And he was like, I could not bear the shame. But he also reflected on something about human nature, which allow me to read. The average man is never satisfied with what he has.
That is true.
He does not realize when he is well off. If he has a shirt, he wants two. If he is single, he wants a wife. If he is married, he wants a harem. And he is always reaching for the moon and stepping off into space. And so you find a situation where the Ponzi scheme was really playing on our really innermost instincts to succeed and succeed quickly, right? And so he never really ever got around to publicly admitting that he had done something wrong. He was the eternal optimist. And so he says, I kept up the bluff, hoping that I might eventually hit upon some workable plan to pay all of my creditors in full. Now, when there was a run, when people discovered that there was something wrong with the investment, a lot of people flocked to his office. But in true Ponzi PR stunt fashion, he decided to give coffee and sandwiches to those who were waiting outside the office, waiting to get their money back. And this one simple stunt made sure that some even turned back. Some were like, oh no, he can't be a bad person.
He gave me a sandwich.
Give me coffee and sandwiches. He's solid. And some were so convinced that one person said, he's the greatest Italian of them all. Columbus had discovered America. Marconi, a guy, had discovered the wireless. But Charlie, now Charles Ponzi, you discovered where the money is. So he really played on his charisma and what the papers would write about him. So the newspapers eventually investigated and found that he was a fraud. But before then, they really allowed the investments to carry on. They gave him confidence.
What a guy.
I love this conman. And now I will
you
tell
love
you,
the conman.
I love this conman. I'll tell you about the modern day Charles Ponzi. And his name is Bernard Madoff, otherwise known as Bunny Madoff, otherwise known as Mr. Wall Street. Now, this is a man who oversaw $65 billion Ponzi scheme. Now, before I tell you how he did that, let me tell you where he started from. You see, this man started an investment firm in 1960 with only $5,000 that he had made as a lifeguard. Of all things, a lifeguard. Now, this guy became so successful that about 5 to 10% of all trade at Wall Street, made at Wall Street, was actually being done by Madoff. Now, he rose to become the chairman of NASDAQ. NASDAQ is the second richest stock market in the world, with companies like Apple, Google, Microsoft. That's where they list their stocks. Now, Madoff's success was so scintillating that everyone knew that he was the best trader and he would earn you some money. And some money was, this was nothing wrong making some money. But nothing could go wrong with making some money from Madoff, right?
I suppose.
Wrong. See, there's a guy called Harry Markopolos. Harry Markopolos was a financial fraud investigator. So in 1999, he caught wind that a portfolio manager in one of his partner firms was consistently churning out 1%, 2% profit margins every single month. Now,
no fluctuations. So they found out that he was actually using Madoff strategy. So this Markopolos guy was like, geez, what magic could this man be using? Now, Markopolos went through Madoff's revenue streams, and he realized something was off. You see, Madoff's returns were so consistent, and when the market went up, Madoff made a profit. And when the market went down, he was still making a profit. Now, Markopolos knew that something was fishy. Now, he came up with two theories. Either Madoff was trading using insider information, or he was actually undertaking a Ponzi scheme. And Ponzi scheme it is. Now, here is how it worked. Now, investors would give money
to Madoff. Now, Madoff would say, I am going to invest in a certain fund. But what Madoff would do, he would actually take this money and take it to his bank account. And then at the time when the return was going to mature, he would go back to his bank account, take that little bit of money, top it up on the initial investment, and return it back to the initial investor. Now, the initial investor would be very happy. And he would go and tell other investors that I have invested in Madoff and I've made this amount of money. You could also make this amount of money. Now, it spread through word of mouth. And it's a method they call social feedback loop. Now, we had so many other guys, telling others, oh, go and invest with Madoff, he's made this amount of money. But this guy was also a mkora because, you see, I don't know whether you people have invested in stocks. You have what you call a CDS account. Now, in the CDS account, they send you a monthly statement as to how your account looks like because you've either debited or you've credited. Now, that's what Madoff used to send his clients. Now, they thought that stuff was so legit. Now, the reason they stayed with Madoff is Madoff did not necessarily give the best returns, but his returns were so consistent. So if the market was giving you 18%, Madoff would give you 10%.
But a consistent 10%.
Consistent 10%. Now, one would ask, how would regulators not have thought that this man was playing with people's money? You see, they say Madoff could lie so well. He could lie without blinking, but also as well, who would be able to question the man that was called Mr. Wall Street? For goodness sake, he made Wall Street itself. Now, to cut long story short, the global financial crisis hit. The man who had taken millions and billions in pension funds, with their version of NSSF, billionaires' money, people's money, savings and all that. You know what this guy used to do with that money? He used to go and buy yachts.
I think that was the most surprising thing to me. This guy was not doing a thing with people's money.
He wasn't investing. He was putting it in his bank account. So he was buying nice homes, he was buying planes, he was buying
yachts, living the life.
Now, when global financial crisis hit, the money that he had spent, he couldn't pay it back. But you know why he couldn't pay it back? Because he was used to getting investors' money. And then the way you named the Ponzi scheme, the way you structured it, he couldn't pay it back. Now the guy had actually to go and confess because he knew he was done. It was
there was no more Peter to pay Paul.
Yes, so in 2009, the guy was taken to court. The judge slapped him with a 150-year jail sentence. The guy is still he's
there's some good movies guys can watch. There's The Wizard of Lies and there's Madoff by ABC, the channel ABC.
Absolutely.
So that will come up on the screen.
Absolutely.
So guys, on a day where we had a winning headline from the Daily Nation and no winning cartoons, but a winning story about Brady Madoff from 2M, I want to leave you in this. So this, in the end, this is what we can learn about Con Week. Why does anyone still continue to fall for such scams? Well, it's human nature. The crook knows that there are basic human factors that they can appeal to. The desire to do what you think you see other people are doing around you. Making money and getting rich. That's why Madoff was so successful. One friend would say to the other, you must invest in Madoff. In other words, it's a lot of wishful thinking. In 1920, people saw Charles Ponzi and Bernie Madoff later on, as a man who could make the impossible possible. Do have a lovely weekend, but also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Find us on TV. We're on GoTV, Pang Free to Air.